I am not sure what I told you all some time ago, or not too long ago, but I was thinking I've kind of journeyed through some, maybe fancy term would be Anabaptist distinctives, or the way we're a bit different in light of this being 500th anniversary of Anabaptism. And some of the ways that we as a people maybe do specifically our theological differences. And this is, and I think maybe I had said something to the effect that, I'm kind of done with that, and now I'm not done with it. So, and this one, I was actually going to do two things in one message because I didn't want to go too deep, and I got about, I don't know, halfway done. I said, man, this is not going to work. Too much. Two will be too much for one and not enough for two, and I was trying to figure it out anyhow. So I decided just to look at one subject this morning. This is a unique subject. It's one that I really didn't necessarily want to go dig into. I thought about several facts related to this. One is, as a congregation, Dan, were you called in 2017, maybe about? So it's been 8 years since we've had an ordination, did anything like that. Another fact of the matter is, those of us that are ordained probably go to a lot more ordinations than most of you do, simply because we're told about every Keystone ordination there is, encouraged to go to them all, but we surely don't. And specifically within the district would be expected to be at them all. So we get to a lot of ordinations, and you hear ordination sermons and things about leadership. We're involved in examination meetings and those kind of things, which is, kind of something that's, it happens, but, it's not out in front. You're not thinking about it as much, and that's okay. And this subject is even a little separate from that, but it is a distinctive. Where I work, the vast majority of people, and I don't talk about it much, but the few times I've had the opportunity to tell people that, yeah, I serve as a pastor as well, and they kind of like, what are you doing here? Like, that's a career, that's a job, and you're here. There's a total disconnect. Like, that's not how you do. I mean, that's not normal. And so the idea of unsalaried shepherds as an Anabaptist way of doing things, and I'm not sure how to say it, if you would say conservative, you say traditional, because there are churches within the Anabaptist community at different places on that pendulum of how they do that type of church. I'm going to look at this area of church life and the way we do it simply as an awareness thing. I think it's something we don't, and it is a bit awkward to talk about. First time I ever really looked at this subject on my own, and it is something we don't talk about a lot, and I don't have all the answers, and it is not something that you can go and get reams of scriptural background, but there are definitely some scriptural principles applied. Our leadership, and I'm not, or our way of calling leader, and I'm not only looking at that, but our leadership structure, or I don't know if that's a good term, is not radically different from a lot of other traditional Christian churches. I would guess that. I did very, very little study on what other evangelical Protestant churches do, particularly in the last 100 years or so. We do gain from Scripture some ideas of what the early church's pattern was. There was 3 general offices, and one of the things that's just a little distinctive, the term bishop used in the New Testament is used differently, and it more closely fits the role of minister in our settings. But it is clear that the early church had someone in an overseer or a director type role. From Timothy, we can see definitely from what was said would have been one of those. But we have generally 3 offices in general: bishop, minister, and deacon. Minister principally is the idea of a servant and a preacher of the word, and a deacon is a helper of both above offices, and specifically to look after the well-being of the congregation in both spiritual and physical matters. There are other avenues and other offices which often those that hold these offices get involved in, and those are that of evangelist, missionary, teacher type roles. I'm not intending to do a whole, complete, full study on our leadership structure and why we do everything we do. I would like to spend some time looking at 2 areas that we differ from other churches on, and the one is finding leaders. How someone that's under the age of 20, can you tell me, how does the neighboring churches out here in evangelical Protestant world, how do they find their leaders? The next group will be 20 to 40, so if I don't get responses. How do they, 20 to 40, how do they find their leaders? And I'm not speaking from tremendous point of knowledge, but a little bit I know. Any ideas? It is. It's someone from the outside, usually someone that got educated in the field. So they probably have ways of connecting to what would we call them? Probably theological places of study. They would have a way of connecting with them. Generally, people would choose it as a career path, go to school, get an education, and then churches would look for help. It's often the way it would. There are varying patterns, and I'm not here to talk about other groups. We're thinking about how we find leaders. I want to be very clear. I think we need to be very, very careful. I personally believe, and I'm pretty sure on this, we can talk about it later, but I'm pretty sure there are no perfect ways of doing it and a way that is always right and has no failings, or that's not true. Why is that true? Because I'm talking about the church at large. Now, the church is made up of people are fallen, all systems connected to that are broken to one degree or another, less than perfect, outside of the perfection of God. And so our systems, and I think we should continue to work at improving the systems, but systems aren't perfect. So how do we find leaders? What do we do? This gets into probably, if you're familiar with that would help us as churches that when you're going through the finding leader process, you would hear messages a little more, first from the home bishop, and then secondly by a visiting bishop on Sundays leading up to a time when you're looking to take names for leadership. But what do we do? Where do we find our leaders? Do we generally import a pastor from Ohio or Ontario or Virginia, or is that how we do? No, we don't. Generally, we find someone from within the group. And I'm going to go to some passages, and in connection with some of these thoughts, and you may say that was a stretch, and you might be right sometimes. But there are some precedents for why we do what we do. And I would say that I think our early Anabaptist forefathers did give this some thought. It wasn't just they went, as a term I used, went pell-mell down the road of church life and just did it that way because they couldn't figure out a better way to do it. We kind of assume that because that's often how we tend to operate, because we don't think about these things a lot. But we didn't get, it wasn't originally, the course wasn't originally set in that way. And I think we have to be careful with that in mind, having that mindset. 1 Peter 5:1 says this, "The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed." There, the idea is of a leaders that are among you, and that could be those in a place of calling already. But again, I think I get the idea from among, and I think it's good as one of the group. What if you think back, users that are a little older and have been through the ordination process, maybe not personally, but you were personally, because the congregation, we believe the congregation calls, it's very important for the congregation's voice in that calling. What do we look at? And we have very good scriptural background for why we do this way. What do we look at? Do we look at where they went to school, what their personal traits are? What's the basis? Someone shout it out. What are we called? It's tremendous scriptural background for this. I'm going to go to 1 Timothy 3. I'm going to go to Titus 1. Specifically talks about this. What do we look at when we're thinking about leaders? I'll tell you this, in my experience. There's times in life you get to be a mouse and you sit in the background, and this probably would never happen at Living Water because of the place I'm at. But sometimes you get to hear people talk about things, and you can sit there and they don't really know who you are, or they don't know. One of the things I have been amazed at is how often, even within our conservative Anabaptist settings, the idea of a good speaker comes up in choosing a minister. So that's what we're looking at. That's how is there a scriptural basis for that? We go to the Bible and say, yep, that's what. What from the Bible? What? Somebody shout it out. Come on, somebody's got to know this. This is 101 church leadership. What do we look at? Character, okay. Life, we would maybe is a simple way of saying it. We study their life. Let's go to Titus 1. Titus 1, verses 6 through 9. This specifically calls out the office of bishop, but we believe it pertains to anyone called to church leadership. Titus 1, verses 6 through 9. If any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. For a bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, and not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he has been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. We could go to 1 Timothy 3, which says a lot, and I'm not going to read all of that. It's about the first 13 verses or so of most of that chapter, 1 Timothy 3. And it says many of the same things, mentioning both bishops and deacons, and I believe there it specifically mentions their wives as well. So we studied the life before calling. As Anabaptists, that has been, and I think should be, maybe the number one, or if not the, one of the highest thing, the most important things. We study their life, who their life says they are. Another, and this idea, this is one of the places you may say I'm stretching it out here, stretching it a little bit. I want to go to 1 Peter 2 and think about this a little. The idea, and we go another direction other than church leadership, and church leadership is not the main emphasis here, but the idea of the priesthood of all believers. It says, and I'm going to read that, 1 Peter 2, starting at verse 4. To whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious, ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. Therefore also it is contained in Scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he that believeth on him shall not be confounded. Unto you therefore which believe he is precious, but unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner, and a stone of stumbling, a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient. Wherefore also as they were appointed. But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praise of him who hath called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light, which in time past were not a people, but now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Again, it's not directly related to finding servants of the church, but it indicates that God intends for all his followers in the New Testament to in some way serve his kingdom and the church. But from that basis, I think it is fair that we believe God will gift and enable each local assembly of the church with those that can be under shepherds for him. God will enable and God will supply for those needed. I think the idea that we need to look, we don't have anyone qualified, so we're going to look outside, is not really, I'm not sure that's scriptural. I'm not sure that's there. And the idea of the priesthood of all believers is that we all can be a part of and be enabled. Another thing which I didn't really, it's an assumed thing, but what should be the number one unequivocally requirement of anyone called the church leadership? They are without a doubt what? Converted, saved, born again. You fill the term in that is used. I think that's, that should be so front and center. And that should be front and center for anybody that's a part of a, quote, member. We often use the terminology. Another a part of this, the priesthood of all believers, and I'm kind of lumping it together with the idea of brotherhood. It's another closely held belief of the early Anabaptists, and we've kind of held on to it more than many of our other Protestant neighbors. It supports the idea that from within each local assembly will gain the most by calling one from within. I would suggest that the church will generally be served the best by those that are a part of it. Who generally takes care of something the best? The owner or somebody else? We know that. That's pretty basic, right? Usually, if it's yours, you take care of it better. It's human nature. And the church is going to be best served by someone that owns it. And I want to be very careful with that, but takes a degree of ownership, not the way we would in physical things, but they're a part of it. I'm going to go to John 10 yet in this realm of thought, and then we'll be moving on a little bit more. John 10, 11 through 15. This is the idea of, it's not the idea, this is the teaching of Jesus himself of being the good shepherd. As I understand, this was one of the passages that in the past that the Anabaptists held to pretty closely for having called those from within to serve the church. John 10, verse 11, I am the good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. Obviously, that's Jesus talking about himself. But then he goes on, and he says, but he that is an hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Again, like I said, this passage, first and foremost, is about Jesus being the good shepherd, for sure. But the idea of a hireling is introduced here, and the potential problems a hireling brings. And it's probably one of the most discouraging passages of a fully supported, career-oriented ministry model. We view the ministry as should view the ministry as under shepherds serving under the great shepherd, which we have that teaching right here. A servant partner of Christ rather than an employee. I think that's an important difference to note. If you are going to have a career, fully supported person, and I may get into that a little more, it is just almost humanly impossible to divorce that concept from the idea of an employee. But if we have the concept that this is a partner of Christ serving as an under shepherd, it allows for a little bit different pathway. 1 Timothy 3:3, Titus 1:7, which I read already, and 1 Peter 5:2. These passages all warn of the man that would be motivated by money in pursuing the office in the church. So I think under that, the danger, and the term it uses in the King James Version is greedy of filthy lucre. And not making a living isn't being greedy of filthy lucre. And you can get into a lot of debates about what all that means. But it just seems that it's the scripture, again, they come back to that over and over, that in scriptural teaching. The connection and the difficulties connected with preaching for pay. These are not original with me, but I'm going to look at 5 reasons not to have a salaried ministry. And these are some of them splitting hairs, and maybe even worse than that. They're very, very closely connected, maybe. But the one is that the gospel is free. Salvation is a gift from God. Freely we have received, freely we give. It is God's will. Well, I ask you this question. Is it God's will that the richest people have the best ministry? Think that through. Who can afford the very best? Who can pay the highest price for the best minister? The richest congregation, right? It's not too hard to connect those dots. Therefore, the richest would have the best, right? If we're just looking at abilities, whatever all you want to make. That's how it works in the real world with all other occupations, right? Or am I way off base? No, I think we can connect that dot. So why wouldn't that dot connect in the church? Therefore, every church in the United States should have a pastor that would be significantly better than the one in some of the poorest countries in Africa, right? Now you can get into what equates to living standards across congregations, and that's a fair question. But the systems, particularly the capitalistic system, which we like to all jump on that bandwagon, would say that the richest church is going to have the best pastor, right? Because they can pay the most for it. Hopefully we understand the gospel is universally free, and the gospel should not be bound by that type of restriction. This is from Doctrines of the Bible here. Daniel Kaufman made this statement, and this is venturing a little away from that thought now. It is honorable, healthful, and scriptural for the minister to labor with his hands to support himself and his family. And so I think it does us well to, I think there are issues with that. Maybe the other side of that is, and I'm going to say this, yeah, and we can talk about this later, but from your place, remember, all of us that are ordained in living water, we sat in your place at one time. There was a day when we were members and we weren't ordained too. So we understand being at that place at least a bit, although it has been many years for some of us. But the other side is, it's not fair to you to compare your minister to the fully supported Protestant minister next door. The guy that had years of education and it's his full-time employment. It does feel like, so you want me to function at that caliber. Is that fair? Does that, I must be very careful. See, I can't go there. I cannot do that. I don't want to do that. But I encourage you to a congregation, you can't go there either. Now, we have the blessing of plural ministry, which has a lot of benefits. Again, remember what I said earlier. There are no perfect ways, only ways, 100% right ways. All systems have their breakdowns. That fully supported minister, whatever denomination he's a part of, in time and training will probably be superior, just looking at human standards. Moving on, number 2, the minister, the Lord's servant. I think that's something we want to always remember. When you're in a pay for what you get system, who is the fully supported minister? Who is he servant to? Yeah, he should be the servant of the church, and many of them probably are to some degree. But all of you that are employees, who are you servant to? You're servant to your employer, right? Whoever signs the check. The minister, the Lord's servant. It's going to be very, very, very hard for the human pastor to divorce himself totally from that idea. That the one who signs my check is not my head or the one I answer to. I want to go to 2 Timothy 2, verse 15, thinking about this idea a little bit more. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. The system we have helps those in the ministry to keep the focus that the Lord is our master. I am so glad I do not serve in a church where I've got to figure out now who is my boss. The person that writes the congregation as they write the check, or the Lord? Who am I responsible to? And how does that affect so many things that come out of my life? Okay, I need to really keep moving on. The salary as a muzzle, Isaiah 56, verses 10 and 11. I won't take time to turn there because of time. It talks about there being leaders being dumb dogs. The idea is that of, you know, a dog, like, I don't know about, we have a fairly old dog. Right now in these hot summer days, he's a pretty dumb dog. He lays there, he's looking for a cool spot, and he just isn't exerting himself at all. Yeah. And the same can kind of happen when you have leadership that is fully, that's their career, that's their job, or their only job. Another part of that is, and I'm going back to the idea of an employee. How many, and now I want you to be really, really honest with me. All of you that are employees, how have you ever felt the difference between what you're pretty sure is the right thing to do versus what your employer said to do? How many? Hands real high. Come on, get them up there. Be honest. I'm not sure we're being very honest here. There's a lot less employees than I thought. That's real. If you haven't felt that ever, you haven't worked too long. That's my opinion. That's real. Because there are, and I'm not, there, and it may not, I'm not putting it on a sin level, you know, this is you've sinned if you've done that. But it's like, you're pretty sure this is the right way. This is what we ought to do this job right. And they say, no, you're going to do it this way. This is the way. And you're in that quandrum. What do you do as an employee? What do you need to do? You need to come under their authority or quit. That's the other option. And do we understand how the fully supported minister is very much in that quandrum? The need for a paycheck can cause one to keep their mouth shut. That's real. Whether you want to believe it or not, that's real. Now, it is not a guarantee that a salary will do that, but there is definitely the higher potential for freedom and independence to be lost and the message to be influenced. Fourthly, a commercialization of gospel work. If we're going to place the work of the ministry on the same plane as other professions, we're inviting the ministry to look more inviting. In different places. I'll illustrate it to you this way. I know a couple hours north of here, a little Baptist church. They have a hard time keeping their ministers. Now, they kept one for quite a number of years, but that's because he grew up just one county over, and he was used to their economic scale. But you know what invariably happened? Their ministers were called to a place of better economic proportions. I have no way of judging those men. I just saw it often enough. And you talk to anybody that knows that. That's how it, very, 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 very few ministers get called to a lower salaried church if they're making the personal decisions. It's just how it works. It's human nature. How many of you like taking a pay cut? How many of you can take a pay cut? ministers are humans and have much the same constraints as everybody else's budgets. And so it works that way. I think we need to honestly look at that when we think about that. We often bemoan the evil of materialism, and rightly so. But if we're going to a fully salaried ministry, we could very easily placing a rock of offense before the ministry, in my opinion. Moving on, fifth, lastly, the possible entwining snare, according to 1 Corinthians 7, 22 and 23. I'm debating if I'm going to quickly turn to that. And, this is so close to 4, I'm not sure it's really worth calling them to be separate points. But 1 Corinthians 7, verses 23 and 24. You are bought with a price, be not the servants, verse 22, I want to start. For he that is called in the Lord, being a servant, is the Lord's free man. Likewise also, he that is called, being free, is Christ's servant. You are bought with a price, be not ye the servants of men. It is there the idea of one already being called, but I would like us to consider that he's free. I think that's what getting, and I don't have time to get into all the context of that scripture, but the idea of not being free and being the Lord's free man there is to be noted. I would like us to consider the other side. So we kind of look at it, well, what happens if we go to a fully supported ministry? Because those of us that are presently in the ministry. But let's move back from that a couple generations. If the Lord tarries, in a couple generations, where will that go? Could a good salary attract young men that are unqualified? Even maybe unconverted. They may be attracted by a moral, honorable profession that doesn't require dirty hands or hard physical labor. The attraction of public speaking and the influence upon others can be inviting for some, along with the possibility of gaining acclaim because of ability. Those things are real, need to be considered. Thus, the kingdom of God and the souls of men and women are not the motivating factors for someone's involvement, consideration of being involved in ministry. And the church of God would suffer irreparable loss. Now, before you throw these last several points out as not very likely to happen, what is really interesting is to look at numerous of the first generation Anabaptist leaders. Who were they? Where did they come from? Think Menno Simons, Michael Sattler. They were priests in the Catholic Church. That's where they came from. And if you study, they seem to have a real problem. We don't know everything, but they were very, and some of it may have been the persecution and all that was going on, but there seemed to be very, I'm guessing the way it appears, a very distancing from the full-time ministry. And numerous of them talked about they weren't even converted in their place. And they loved the life of pleasure, ease associated with that it allowed for in some ways. Now, was that a church problem or a personal problem? And I would say both. Was the church where it should have been at? No. Were they at where they should have been at? No. A salaried clergy was not the total problem, for sure. But it didn't help them for sure, and it caused the early Anabaptists to seek another way. It's my understanding that our pattern of calling and finding servants and shepherds of the church today is still influenced by this past. Is it the only way? No, I'm not saying this is the only way. I think it's proven to be as good way as any other way out there. It was interesting to me, very early in my ministry, someone from totally outside, Living Water, Keystone, a distant friend from the past when I was young, gave me a book, and it was about burnout and some of those things, and it was written totally from the Protestant perspective. Do you realize that as conservative Anabaptists, your leadership stays in place a lot longer than the average Protestant church out there? They are hopping around like you wouldn't believe. Some of it's burnout, some of it's higher salary, I would guess, and it's not my job to figure all that out. Now, very quickly, I know I'm out of time. There are challenges for both the called and the church in our system. Our system isn't perfect. It's got some issues that we need to ponder on both sides of the fence. Probably for the called, the single biggest issue is one that we all deal with in living life, and that is of self-denial. That can extend to business and employment. That's a real thing, is how do I weigh out making a living and the call of the church, and that it feels like they're so often fighting each other, can't do either of them right, and how do we work through that? And along with that is commitment to other endeavors. I do question this thing. Serious question I have is the expectation of our larger Anabaptist community of the ordained serving on all kinds of boards and this and that. We want to make the preachers run to all kinds of other stuff yet. Is that right? Is that the way it should be? We're looking at issues for the called. The wisdom in allocating time. And specifically, I'm thinking on the social and recreational levels. I think that's something that needs to continually be worked at, is when the call to the ministry comes, we might not be able to live like... There's some teaching that we get influenced by, and that is you can't just drop everything else when you're called. But sometimes I worry that we're swerving to the ditch on the other side, and we can't let it affect our life at all. We're going to keep doing everything else we did before. Then we can't figure out why we burn out. And but that's one of the challenges another of the challenges, and the needs of the family. And we all have need to watch and to think about that, consider that. I need to quickly move to the last, the challenges for the congregation. The number one thing I have there is the commitment to the brotherhood. And this is on several areas. It includes being involved. One of the reasons, let's go back to that little Baptist church that I talked about. Do you know what their pastor's schedule looked like? He talked Sunday morning, he talked Sunday night, he talked Wednesday evening, and on and on and on. You see, what happens is when a church pays somebody full time, they say, now we got to get value for our money. We need to keep this guy, we need to keep him moving. We need to keep... For one, that leads to burnout, and it leads to a congregation. When you're hearing that same voice all the time, it doesn't last. It don't stand the test of time many times. In my observation, my guess. So the Anabaptist model is that we're not just going to pay the preacher to do it all. Or is it? We kind of like that sometimes. Let me live my life. I'll get my purse out and I'll pay a little more, but I want somebody to do it. So I don't. Some of you will think about that. Yeah, tomorrow night we'll find out. Some people have new jobs again. But see, our value of the brotherhood makes it that, yeah, I want to do that for the church. Sure, I'll do that for the church. And it's not just the idea that I wish somebody else would do that so I can live my life, have my own schedule. And along with that whole idea of commitment to the brotherhood, it involves facilitating many parts of it. One of probably the messiest things than the things, and I want to say I'm very blessed to serve at Living Water, because it hasn't been an issue many times. Can't say that it's been in perfection over my years. Go to Matthew 18, church discipline. Who's to do it? Do you know who a fair amount of people think are to do it? It's the church. Are you a member? Part of your job description. Yep, church discipline falls on everybody. Not just the ministry, not just the leader. Some people like to go, hey preacher, watch that guy over here. Did you talk to him yet? Oh no, that's not my job. So we want this idea of brotherhood. The way we do church leadership helps to, we do that church leadership partially because we see it functions a little different than the way it does in the business world that we're used to. Another thing that is the idea of helping to shepherd if called, according to 1 Peter 5, 2 through 4. One of the other challenges I would invite to the congregation to think about is enabling shepherds to make the bivocational lifestyle work. Some of that, and we, as you know, you support the ministry, and I thank you for that, and giving of financial support. Also, well, can I be really, really personal? At 30 years old when I was called, and I got used to it. I was surprised that there wasn't more of a support network, whatever you want to term it. They're saying it felt like making the bivocational lifestyle work was all my baby. You figure it out now. We ordained you, you figure it out. There was no network to help. What can we do? Maybe, we'll offer you a job opportunity. We know your situation. Or maybe, hey, I see a business, say somebody come to you and say, I see a business opportunity. I think this would work well for the bivocational situation you're in. I invite you to consider this. In my experience, there was absolutely zero. We're going to help you figure out the bivocational lifestyle. It's on you. Figure it out. And then, I get it. We all got to live our own lives and be responsible for ourselves. But I would invite us as a larger Anabaptist community, and a lot of this I'm not saying specifically to Living Water, but I'm saying as conservative Anabaptists, let's think about this. Let's wrestle with this a little. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, the idea of keeping expectations of shepherds reasonable, particularly in light of them being bivocational. And again, I'm not saying this directly to Living Water at all, but specifically in the area of time. Just because someone's ordained, they don't get more hours in their day. That's just the cold, hard facts. And so remember that in your expectations. In closing, the Anabaptist way of doing numerous things can be a bit unorthodox sometimes. And church leadership is that's true as well. But sometimes those unorthodox ways have positive and beneficial attributes that we don't want to minimize or forget about. And I think, from my perspective, the idea of the bivocational servant leadership model, it would be a shame for us to lose it and to put it aside from what, if you study it, and I haven't done a lot, but observe from a distance, I'm not sure that another system has shown to be better, far superior. And so let's not throw our way out too hastily. Let's kneel for a word of prayer.